Welcome. My name is Dan Law. I'm the mayor of Tofino. Good afternoon, and again, welcome to the town hall. It's great to see you all here. This evening, we will be responding to comments and questions regarding the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act. Council began a public consultation process in late January to hear from the community regarding the ability for Tofino to opt in to the principal residence requirement under the Act. And the council will make a decision at the March 12th, 2024 regular council meeting on that particular question. This evening, I'm joined by councillors and staff. We have our CAO, Ms. Etienne, and Ms. Morehouse. We have Councillor McMaster, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Steer, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor Sawyer. Again, it's great to see you here. Since staff presented at the January 23rd regular council meeting, several updates have been posted on Top Tofino, and I'm just going to give you a summary of the updates. The first update is on legal non-conforming permissions. For short-term rentals, this is a component of the Act, a significant component of the Act. Legal non-conforming permissions for short-term rentals have been removed from legislation by the province of BC for all communities, including Tofino. As of May 1st, 2024, legal non-conforming properties, with respect to short-term rental permissions only, will no longer be able to operate unless they come into compliance. There is no option for council to opt out of this particular aspect of the legislation. The only decision council is making currently is whether to opt into the principal residence requirement. There's been updates for you on Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing. At the January 23rd, 2024 council meeting, staff stated that more clarity was required from the province regarding how Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing properties would be impacted should council choose to opt into the principal residence requirement. Unfortunately, the province was unable to support that request for information and clarity, and so the district sought a legal opinion. We obtained that legal opinion regarding these properties, and the legal opinion confirms that Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing are not exempt from the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, and therefore, if council chooses to opt in, the principal residence requirement will apply to these properties. Principal residence requirement. The province of BC confirmed that a principal resident can be a long-term tenant. It does not have to be the property owner. At this time, there will be no provincial or federal evaluation of who is collecting the income from the short term. The information the province will require to confirm the long-term tenant will come out with the provincial registry information in late 2024 or early 2025. I just want to make a comment that the principal resident did appear to change from the initial provincial announcements, which did appear at first to indicate owner occupied. Provincial registry. By late 2024 or early 2025, the province will establish a short-term rental registry. This will help ensure that short-term rental hosts and platforms are following the rules and provide local governments and the province information needed to follow up when they don't. Hosts will be required to include a provincial registration number on their listing. Platforms will be required to validate registration numbers on host listings against the provincial registry data. Note on the Provincial Compliance and Enforcement Unit. To ensure the province's rules, the provincial rules are being followed, the province will establish a Provincial Compliance and Enforcement Unit. This will include, this unit will track compliance, issue orders, and administer penalties for violations. Just a final note from me on zoning bylaw review. At the December 12th, 2023 council meeting, staff recommended a phased work plan to introduce amendments to the District of Tofino's zoning bylaw. The report presented at that meeting can be found under important links section of the Talk Tofino STR consultation page. This process will begin after council decides whether to opt in to the principal residence requirement under the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act. The first phase of the zoning bylaw review work plan after planning and information gathering phase will be to review zoning for short-term rentals. The decision to opt in to the principal residence requirement will be the first of many discussions with the community regarding short-term rental permissions. And just a note, this is a final note for me, we do have this room booked after this meeting, so we will end at 6:05. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Etienne.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Can everyone hear okay? A little bit louder? Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Today I'm going to be moderating the session, and I know we have limited time, so I'll speak very quickly and get through the rules for the evening. So this session is recorded and will be posted on the Talk Tofino consultation page. We have virtual attendees via Zoom today. However, given the high number of attendees in the room, we'll be prioritizing questions and comments from the in-person today. We ask that you approach a microphone to ask your question so we can ensure that all questions and answers are recorded. Please be as concise as possible when providing your comment or asking questions so that as many attendees as possible have an opportunity to speak. For virtual attendees, please put your questions in the chat function on Zoom, and if time allows, we will respond to those questions. If we don't have time to answer them today, we'll generate a report after today's session and post the answers on Talk Tofino. If you don't get an opportunity to ask a question or provide your comment today, you may post it on Talk Tofino until February 26th, and we will ensure that we answer those questions. And I just ask that you ensure that your comments are respectful this evening. We are here to listen to everyone tonight and hear everyone's voice. Today is an opportunity for you to address council, and it's also an opportunity for you to hear from each other. Okay, so we'll now move on to the question and comment period. Your questions can be directed to a particular councillor or a few councillors, and you may say who, or all of council if you would like. So please, I'll just ask, we have two microphones set up, one here and one here at the front. You can feel free to line up to those microphones and we'll just alternate between the two. And if there's no questions from the room or comments, you're allowed to come up and just speak to council for about 1 to 2 minutes, just to allow an opportunity for everyone to come up and speak. And we just ask that you don't come up again until we rotate through everybody. And if no one else would like to ask a question, you can come up for a second time. So please feel free to approach a microphone and ask a question or provide a comment. No need to raise your hand. You can feel free to just line up by the mic.
You opt in, does it mean that the speculation tax kicks in as well? Oh, if we opt in here, but does it mean that the speculation tax kicks in if you don't rent it? And let's say 4 families have a property as a vacation property. And they're, obviously it's not their principal residence, but they're spending probably each a month or 2 at the property. Now what happens? Do they have to pay the speculation tax for $100,000 a year or what?
I can answer that question. Most of the questions should be directed to council, but on something like a tax matter, I can certainly speak to that. The speculation tax is managed by the province of BC. We don't have the ability to decide to opt into the speculation tax. So if the province wanted to apply that tax to our community, we likely wouldn't have a choice and it would be mandated here. But no, if we opt in, the province hasn't said that the speculation tax will apply.
Hello, For anyone who doesn't know, I think I know everybody, but maybe Kat. I'm Tia Travis, and I've been a realtor here for 12 years. And I wanted to talk because I was 100% for the legislation when I first heard about it. I got excited it could be something good for the community. But following the following days, things changed a lot for me, talking to my colleagues and other people in the community, and having clients call me and tell me how they were gonna get around the legislation, all the things they do, made me feel as though the legislation wouldn't actually help, but might hinder and create actually more empty homes, which I didn't think when I first heard it. I'm now completely against it. When I heard the principal resident definition fulfilled by a tenant, I felt our bylaws in place were actually stronger and stricter and better than the ones being proposed by the government. Knowing now what I think I understand of the legislation, it feels like what's gonna change is that Tibbs and Ike would be shut down, and people with single family homes who really wanna keep renting their properties are given two options, and this is based on people calling me and telling me what they would do, is they can fulfill the principal resident requirement by removing a tenant, saying, I'm just gonna call it my principal residence, and I'm gonna have an empty suite because I need that vacation rental income. Or, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong about the principal resident, if it's a tenant needing to be the host. I understood that the tenant must be the one hosting the vacation rental, but they can still hire a company. And I thought it goes without saying, nobody's renting their properties out long-term to give a tenant the ability to short-term rent. So I feel it creates an icky situation where owners are now gonna be asking tenants, hey, can you get my business license in your name and say you're running it so that I can tick my boxes? And whereas right now we just have tenants in place and that's great, and no one's touching them. I thought we created lots of housing when we had those tenants put in place. And as far as maybe, Tibbs and Ike creating homes, I don't think that Tibbs and Ike will ever be homes for people that are affordable. All the clients who have called me said, I'm not selling it, it's just gonna be empty, because most of them bought it because they still wanted a place to stay when they come up. So my clients have told me they would be leaving them empty, and knowing people who purchased in the last few years, if they did rent them out, it would be at a premium, like $4,000 a month to cover their costs. And even for sale, they are waterfront condos, so I don't think they're ever gonna be like affordable housing. Lastly, and I think most importantly, the decision shouldn't be taken lightly, and I ask council just not to rush into it, because I rushed into my emotions at first and got really excited, and then having thought, even when I still thought you had to be the owner, it didn't work in my mind. And now hearing that it's a tenant, the more I hear, the more I don't feel it works for our community. So, and hearing that there's still people's questions being unanswered, I think we should, if anything, just hold on and maybe let some other towns be the guinea pigs. Let's see how that flows out before we rush into opting. And if we do have the opportunity to opt in down the road, I would just ask council to maybe hold off on opting in now, but let's try to create something more unique to Tofino that fits us better.
Well said. Yeah.
Thanks.
Please feel free to approach the microphone and ask a question. Otherwise, I'll start singing.
Hello, I have a question. So if Tofino does not opt in, what will happen? So because all the investors who are banned from other places, bigger towns, will rush here. So every land that is still available, the values will increase immensely. So no family here can afford it anymore. So I would like to know what council thinks of that. So how can we avoid a situation like that?
Thanks for that question. It's a good question. I think we all understand the principle of planning that a property will attain to its highest and best use. or highest and most profitable use. And so it's a good point. If properties, residential properties, are allowed to short-term rental, and that is a significant increase in revenue over long-term rental, then the principle is that they will eventually become that. And so that is a good point. This is the first question that council is faced with, whether or not to opt into the principal residence requirement. It is the first of a review of short-term rentals by and large. So when we embark on a zoning review and rewrite, the first thing that we're going to look at, council and staff, is short-term rentals beyond the principal residence requirement. And that is because council is aware of the impacts of short-term rentals and has been aware for some time, both this council and previous councils, and that this directive has come down for many years. So this is the beginning of a process where council and staff will review short-term rentals and look at further ways of controlling short-term rentals. Does that answer your question? Oh, absolutely. Here.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of the short-term rental situation in other resort communities and other communities under 10,000 that the rules don't automatically apply to Bill 35. Tofino has actually been less restrictive than most resort communities. So I think if we do not opt in, the pressure to come and invest in Tofino, unless we opt in or restrict them otherwise through zoning, yes, there will be a lot of pressure to come and invest in Tofino. I think when we first considered opening up the ability on R1 zonings to add a short-term rental, some of the considerations were around being able to own a house, to have that kind of mortgage helper, to allow for a short-term rental also to either have a tenant or be owner operated. And that was an effort to keep a residential aspect on the zonings that allowed for short-term rentals. Over the years, as that has played out, we've seen a different kind of situation develop. The rental platforms for short-term rentals have added another aspect to it that wasn't considered at that time. So the pressure, like I say, to invest into Tofino will be greater than other resort communities who have otherwise put further restrictions on short-term rentals. So this is a concern in terms of property values, community sustainability. Will we all be able to afford to live here in another 20 years or so? These are the kinds of things I'm considering, at least as a council member, about the viability and sustainability of not only our economy, but our community as well. So those are the considerations that I'm bringing to bear, and I think that is relevant to the question you asked. So thank you.
Hey guys, Scott Payne. I was just hoping for a little clarity on the legal non-conforming. Tofino here, it says the legal non-conforming properties with respect to short-term rental permissions will no longer be able to operate unless they come into compliance. There is no option for council to opt out. And then the BC government page says local governments will have the discretion to determine whether short-term rentals previously granted legal non-conforming use status may continue to be permitted. So we were just wondering which one it is, if we could get some clarity on it.
Absolutely. I think Ms. Atiana has that clarified. We did.
Sure, thank you. So the discretion that council has now and will continue to have, whether they opt in or not, is their ability to amend their zoning bylaw. So the legal non-conforming operations will no longer be able to happen unless council amends their zoning bylaw. So aspects, for example, if a home, well, I'll take maybe a simple one. In 2019, there were amendments to council zoning bylaw, which required if a property owner did not live on the property and operated a short-term rental, they were required to have a vacation rental management company oversee the rental. So there was local oversight on the property. If a property doesn't have that currently, then that's considered legal non-conforming, and that property will be required to have a vacation rental management company oversee. If council chooses to amend their zoning bylaw, that won't happen before May 1st. That's going to be looked at through the zoning rewrite process, which is expected to begin in the spring of this year.
I just wanted some clarification on what you guys were discussing about why people would flood to Tofino to invest in our short-term rentals when we've established that ours are more strict than the opt-in rules. And then you just said that other resorts are already more strict than us on short-term rentals, which hasn't changed then. I mean, if they decide to opt in or opt out, it's up to them. But we're not getting stricter by opting in. We're already more strict than the BC legislation. And we haven't, under what you said, we're less strict than other resort towns, which hasn't changed in the last 6 months unless that, like, I just don't understand how it's gonna flood people here when nothing essentially is changing except for hiking tips.
I'm talking about the number of properties that allow for short-term rentals. In other resort communities, they only allow them in certain areas or not at all. So I'm talking about in the actual zoning. It's embedded in there.
Okay, but this BC legislation, is this about zoning or is this about the new rules about primary residence on site?
I'm talking about zoning. The ability to come and invest here if we don't opt in will mean that we don't have as many enforcement tools. They won't be backed by the province. They'll be up to our own bylaw officers and our own resources within our community to do that, as it has been. I'm not really sure that you think we're more restrictive, but I disagree. We may have more rules in place because we've tried to manage and control them than other places, but that's also because we have more zonings that allow for it. We have about 25% of their total housing stock where it's allowed that has gone to this use. And I'm not really sure how, but there's a lot more room for other short-term rentals to develop, given the zonings that we have.
Okay, sorry, I thought this meeting was about opting into the BC legislation, not our zoning that's taking place after this decision.
This is another layer that would add to our ability to enforce both what we have in place and what might come in the future.
Okay, so to be clear, we're just talking about the enforcement of the minimum requirements. That's what we're discussing then? About opting in and opting out?
My understanding is that if we opt in, we have provincial data collection, data sharing, a whole number of new tools that will make enforcement easier and less cost to the district, hopefully. But anyways, it's one of the considerations that are in before council. So there.
Just one last thing, and I could be wrong, but I thought we would still get the data collecting in those tools, whether we opt in or not. I thought we would still have access to that. That's what I understood. I thought Dan said that at some point, but maybe not. That's my last question.
That's so just to clarify, and it has to do with hopefully we get all the data collection, whether we opt in or not. But the province will only enforce its regulation. So if we don't opt in, so just give you an example in one other town, Ucluelet, for instance. Ucluelet requires a principal resident on site, but they may not opt in to the provincial requirement. If they don't opt in, then the province will not enforce their principal resident requirement, right? So the province is only gonna enforce it if we opt in. So if Tofino requires a principal resident to be the host, then the province will be able to enforce it for us. That's my understanding. If we don't, the province will not. Well, I believe we'll still be, have access to data sharing, et cetera, et cetera. So, but that is one specific aspect of that thing. And just maybe a comment, you know, clarification on other towns, just a clarification on other towns, other resort communities. When it's, when we say that we're less restrictive, I'll give you an idea. In Whistler, no R1 properties are allowed to short-term rental. It has to be specifically zoned for accommodation. That is very across the board in all different ways. The different 14 resort communities have chosen to allow short-term rentals much different than we have. We've blanket allowed all R1 where they're to have a short-term rental if they comply. That is fairly unique in resort communities. So that's one, when we talk about that being less restrictive, that is kind of what we're talking about.
That's about zoning after the fact, though, is it not?
It's it is both zoning and in bylaw. So there's two things. There's the zoning where short-term rentals are permitted by zoning, and then there is bylaw, like business licensing restrictions as well.
Opt-in or opt-out, it's not going to be zoning, except for items.
So that is correct. It is not, as the opting in is a principal residence requirement, and then if we want to further restrict short-term rentals, as other resort communities do, for instance,
Either way, opt-in or opt-out.
or both.
Still do that.
We could do it both. Yeah, we can opt in or not opt in, and we'll still be looking at zoning as well. So that's what we mean. This is the beginning of a conversation about STRs throughout the community. Anybody else want to make a comment on that from up here? Can they come back? Okay, I'll start to look, get council responding as well. Go ahead.
Just before we go to the next question, if you want to have discussion back and forth, just stay at a microphone so we can have everything recorded. That's absolutely fine. I think we have time tonight, so just stay near a microphone. Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to speak to the enforcement piece there. I wouldn't count on provincial enforcement to be significant. I'd wait and see what happens. Speaking from enforcement community, if you think about how often you see conservation officers, how often you see any level of provincial enforcement, including under the Tenancy Act, it's rare. So don't count on that to do the enforcement of this difficult piece. That's all I wanted to say.
Hi there, Andy Gregg. For those of you I don't know, I was born and raised in Tofino. Years ago, my family and I, we bought a Ike land unit. We took a big chance on that, big risk at the time of our lives. We obviously short-term rented, and I just wanted to break down as a local who owns one of those, some of the numbers that we deal with. Our operating costs are, roughly around $3,000 a month with the strata, mortgage, everything, and that's at a relatively low mortgage rate. I wouldn't rent that for $3,000 a month. It would be more than that if it was deemed long-term as my only option. We refinance in September. That's not going to be 2.74% anymore. It's probably going to be up and around 5%. So add another $700-800 to that. And that's just unrealistic. You're not going to rent a place in town. So there's going to be zero long-term capability with that. But what I would do is I would end up selling it to an out-of-towner. Ike would end up sitting like the Shore and Kingfisher. If you go down to the parking lot at Kingfisher right now, there's no cars there. It's all It's all out of town owned. I mean, there might be a couple families that own them, but there's not long term. And I just don't see what it's gonna do here. It's only gonna hurt us, I think. A lot of jobs. There's cleaners, property managers. It's our business. We did take a chance. I wanted something for my kids down the future, just because I know it is hard in this town. It's my retirement. I don't have a pension. It's potentially going to devalue the place. It's, you know, pulling the rug out from under us. What am I supposed to do? I just think it's straight up unfair, especially if it's those two buildings that are waterfront, and it's not going to work that other way. You're not creating any housing. And I actually have long-term tenants at my house where I reside. They'll have to move out because I'll have to vacation at my house to subsidize that, and I will not sell. I'll just sit it empty and wait for the highest bidder. So nothing to that. My question is, can you just explain how that's going to help, and how if you see something else and you've just clarified that we're not totally sure how things are going to change, or if it's, you know, opting in or opting out, whether we get the government involved, we can make our own decisions as a town. And there's nothing yet has proven or shown, no studies saying it's going to improve. Part of our town is, you know, the housing corporation is on a halt. There's 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes for sale in the market right now. I know there's at least a few of them. That's you know, you buy those for cheaper, and they're just sitting there. So where's the demand for this long term? If you could please, anyone just speak on that for me. Thanks.
I can say something, but I'm happy to open it up to council.
You know, Mandy.
Well, I mean, we've had housing studies done. They've shown a demand. That we've entered into the Tofino Housing Corporation, knowing that demand. I think that the housing slowdown right now in sales has got a lot to do with interest rates and less with demand, and affordability as well. There aren't a lot of incomes that can support the kind of mortgage that a house sells for now in Tofino. So I think there's a lot of demand, but maybe not for the price that houses are at right now and the mortgage rates. So that's my take on the demand. I do have a rather long response to this, perhaps, and just to be clear, council is thinking about all of these things. I mean, this is a very difficult decision. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. Some of you who were at the roundtables probably heard this, so forgive me, I'll get it again. And that is the issue of housing in Tofino. It's been identified for many years, and council works on a strategic plan. So we come in, we get elected on a mandate, we get into office, we review the official community plans, which is our community document, vision to action plan, which is also a community document, etc. And then council comes up with a strategic plan to address priorities. And the previous council in 2019 created a strategic plan which highlighted the issue with housing. And there was to address housing. And there was a comment in the strategic plan that said, I don't have it in front of me, but it was pretty much that they were concerned that the median household could no longer afford a home in Tofino. And no doubt that was informed by the 2016 census and the cost of housing at the time. And I just want to give you an example of that. At that time, 2016, the median household, actually, there was about 755 households, so that includes
Fred Tibbs, people living in Fred Tibbs, there's units. So there was 755 long-term households. About 30% of those households could, at that time, afford a median value home in Tofino, 7 years ago. Today, with when we cross-reference the 2021 census with our latest median home values, we know that the median home value now is about 1.6 million. And that can tell us how many people, how many households in Tofino can own a home. And I can tell you there's not many households in Tofino that make $375,000 a year. So we're very, very few households now, and I would guess it's probably around 3%. So in 7 years, we've gone from 30% of households in Tofino able to own a median value home to, in my guesstimation, 3% or less. And those 3% already own homes, okay? And this is not unique to Tofino. This is a global, national, and provincial phenomenon. And there's many issues of why homes are expensive, of course, building supply, building costs and supply, et cetera, but the federal government has underlined the main reason, and that is the financialization of homes. In 7 years, homes are no longer primarily a place to dwell. For people to live, they are as a financial investment. They've been decoupled. Home values are decoupled from income. That is a problem. And so that is essentially part of the issue that we're facing. And the federal government in 2019 passed an act which reaffirmed the UN's global push for housing. And it is to prioritize housing as a dwelling place primarily, and not a investment or a commodity. And that's something that we have to think about. So when we're looking at Tofino as a whole, we have to look not only right now, we have to look in 5 years and 10 years. What does that mean? What does this trend mean? And then we have to look at what the federal government is mandating the provinces and the municipalities to do about it. And that's why the province has done this at this time, is to address this, because in a sense, this is an existential threat. That's the problem. So yes, absolutely. I understand that houses as investments, it's a difficult proposition. There is, on top of that, something that we have to address, and we have to address it as a community. So I just want to say that, just to give you a background. We could talk about Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing specifically if you want, but I'll just maybe open it up for.
No, and sorry, I understand that. It's just, it doesn't address Ike and Tibbs at all. Those will not ever be long-term dwellings. They're commercial zoned, and should be that way. So you didn't really answer. I understand, and I agree with what's happening worldwide, but it's affecting local families.
So just to comment on Fred Tibbs, the Fred Tibbs residential units are residential. They are residential units, and they pay residential tax. And before they were given permissions for STRs, Fred Tibbs specifically, they were homes for people. Many people bought them as their starter home, lived in them, used it to move into other things. So I just want to make that clear, that those residential units are residential units. That's what they're zoned for. They were used for that. And now, I don't know what the percentage is that are STRs. It may be 100.
It's okay to have back and forth, Andy, but if you wouldn't mind using the microphone.
Sure.
It's okay.
You know, that is a question that we have to look at as council. You know, is this decision going to result in, you know, in the release of homes, the increase of long-term rentals or ownership homes or something like that? And that you know, people can have differing opinions on that.
go ahead.
Tom has an answer. We'll open it up to council.
Yeah, more a comment, and I've known Andy almost his whole life, so I fully understand. And one of the things that I think, this is part of a conversation on short-term rental regulations and the public consultation process around that. So we're looking to the community, especially specifically on the housing issue, and there are many components to it. So short-term rentals have been identified clearly as an issue in Tofino. This has been addressed to not just this council, but to the council before, and it has come up a number of times. And so, of course, we have to address this issue, and I would say that the district of Tofino has looked at the housing issue. We have had many tools that we have been utilizing to address the housing issue. And one of those, as we all know, is short-term rental regulations. And we've enacted those regulations when we allowed in almost all residential zonings, as Councilor Anderson pointed to. We then started amending things. So what we did was we then said there needs to be a tenant on site. So there has to be a primary resident on site. Those are one of the key tools that we had. The other thing that we've done, as an example, the most recent council decisions around any of the rezonings or any of the new developments that are coming online, we've said there are no vacation rentals for your rezoning, potential rezoning. We're saying absolutely no vacation rentals in there. We've also created the Tofino Housing Corporation, which has been a strategy to increase housing in a specific market area up there. So I think it's really important for us to have this conversation around short-term rentals because, as has been pointed out, approximately 25% of our housing stock is taken up by short-term rentals. So we do have to address this issue. The central question, I think there may be, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't think the central question tonight was around opting in or opting out, although obviously that's one of the primary concerns of most people here. But it's to have that continuum of conversation around housing in general. And then this particular tool, this is a potential tool to help regulate, and hopefully one way or the other, if we can make the correct decisions, that we will increase housing stock, potentially lower affordability. We don't know. We don't have those answers. That's why we're coming here to find out from the public if these answers, potential tools, I should say, would be viable in accomplishing the objectives that we have set forward as a community. And I'll leave it there.
Oh boy, sorry, Greg. We're referencing 25% of the units, residential units have short-term rental licenses. I'm wondering what percentage of the economy you think is tourism-based, visitation-based? We're gonna just give it a percentage.
Geez, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear on the question of what is the percentage of tourism?
The percentage of our commerce in this town, how much of it do you think is tourism?
I have actually pretty good answers. You want to give? Go for it. I just got some numbers for you, just because I think it's, and these are rounded up or rounded down, just to give you a good.
Oh, either or.
Okay, might be a little bit of both, but so we have approximately 1,900 nightly rental units in town, about 1,000 fixed roof accommodation provider units, so that's hotels, motels, anything over. And I got this from our MRDD discussion, so I have this here, rounded. We've got about, I would say 600 campsites, so that's 1,600 altogether. And then we have about 300 short-term rentals, give or take. Probably a little less. So, and we have about 700 to 750,000 visitors a year. So we know, that's generally our economy right there, our tourism economy for the most part, except for day trippers, et cetera, like that. So just to give you an idea, so 52% of visitors stay at hotels. And this is my numbers, by the way. So this is just based on data I have. Another 32%, et cetera, who stay at campsites. 15% approximately, again, would probably stay at short-term rentals. And So there you go. So those numbers are important to me whenever making decisions, because of course the economy is really important to council. It's of course a priority. So when we make decisions, then we look at numbers and try to figure out what is the impact on our decisions, on our economy, on housing in this particular context.
And does this council think it's in the best interest that the hotels and fixed roof accommodation have 100% of the share of that pie? The campgrounds and hotels are the only people that should host, or maybe people that have a house with an income helper or a vacation apartment. That's what I have, a Tibbs condo. Do you think we could participate in that economy and with a little piece? Just small business owners?
Yeah, that's I mean, the intention, and we can actually go to Councillor Anderson or Councillor Steer about how short-term rentals permissions were justified when council adopted those. So maybe we could turn it over to Councillor Anderson, Councillor Steer.
Maybe I could just quickly answer that. I think what you're saying, and I think the initial thought back in the day was that we want locals to be participating in the tourism economy, to be able to reap the benefits of.
What about today?
So absolutely, and so at the same time, I mean, I don't want to be rhetorical in my answer, but the understanding would be what would be the appropriate number of short-term rentals in the community to be able to. I don't think anybody at the table would argue that how important short-term rentals are to the economy, but also to the tourism product as well. They're a highly valued commodity in the community in terms of our visiting population. I can. Probably almost everybody at this table, and I don't know if everyone in the room has probably stayed at a short-term rental if they vacation somewhere in the province or in the world. So I don't think that's the question. It would be what would be the appropriate amount.
Sort of leading into that.
Yeah, what would be the appropriate amount? That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. And
or who
or
where.
who? Yeah.
So I appreciate that you're recognizing that. I just want to make sure that we are remembering what perpetuates this community. I don't want to be disillusioned. A lot of us did come here on vacation. It might have been 20 years ago. It might have been 40 years ago, but it is a vacation town. And I'm a Fred Tibbs owner. I bought it 2 years ago. The reason I bought it is because I can't afford a real condo for myself to live in. So I actually need the income from the short-term rental. It's basically a little hotel room, so that I can leverage that, so that maybe when the sky's like 5 or 10, I can participate outside of the rental market where I do live. I have spent my entire 16 years here as a caretaker to a short-term rental in 2 different locations. And I have been a cleaning person in vacation rentals amongst council people and staff's homes. I have seen it from a lot of ways. The only reason I'm at Fred Tibbs is because it, yes, is residential, but it also allows temporary accommodation. The way it was explained to me was that it is a crazy zoning from the 90s that doesn't exist anymore, which I can appreciate probably needs rewritten. And I think that we have the tools to rewrite our zoning bylaw. And I'm wondering maybe why we don't go to work on that instead of talking about opting in or opting out to a provincial blanket solution.
Thank you, and I agree 100% with you in terms of our ability to use the tools that a municipal council has, and zoning is one of our strongest tools. Absolutely, I agree 100%. And those are going to be discussions that are coming forward. We've indicated, and staff have we made clear to staff that when we do the zoning bylaw review, which is coming up, hopefully very soon, that will be front loading the questions around STRs, zoning in general, but front-loading the SDR conversations, because I think that's the excellent place for that conversation to take place.
Okay, just while I have the mic and the baby's not crying, I'm gonna keep going. In the spirit of not maybe taking 40 units off the market and speculating on the real estate outcome and where they will go in the housing stock, do you think it's possible that we can maybe support development catered to the housing needs? I know you're getting a new study done, but we do have one from 2021. I will also tell you, I was at a housing summit for locals in 2015, and the median salary for a female was $22,000. So I don't think anyone's been able to buy a house for that median salary in these 10 years. But more on the development side, what are we doing to encourage that? If you tell me we can't because of lack of water, I'm going to ask you why we're not talking about water before we're talking about zoning. Come on, Tom.
I was going to keep going, but in fairness, I think we should allow other councillors.
We will be talking about water a lot very shortly. We have a water master plan. It's a report coming out that will give us a better picture than we've had. We've been, oh God, for about the last 6 years, taking a more intense look at our water, how we can manage what water we do have, getting a better picture of our supply. A long time ago, of course, we had a plan to go to Kennedy Lake. That got sort of put aside by some councils. There's been mixed ideas among the community and on council about whether or not we should have a really good water supply. Do we want the kind of development that would come along with that? So that's a question, it is, for our community and for council about how much do we want to grow and how fast do we want to grow. We are, in the meantime, looking at several development proposals that will increase the housing stock. Windermere Properties, as you probably have been, you seem to be well informed and have followed what we have been doing. There's another proposal for downtown right now.
That's my
20
house.
units.
521 Cypher Crescent, that's my house.
Sorry?
That's my house, I live there. 521 Cypher Crescent, public hearing coming soon.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah.
I'm just wondering
so-
if we could have those 25 units and we could keep Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing.
Okay, it's not council's doing that is changing the position with Fred's and Ike. It's provincial regulations. I think that was just spoken about.
It is council. If council does opt into the principal residence requirement, then Fred, Tibbs, and
That's
Ike
all you're doing.
will not, well, you could short-term rental it if you lived in the property 51% of your time. I mean, that's.
Thank you for putting that on record.
That's, well, that's just the way it is. It's a principal residence, so.
Yeah, for sure.
If, so we're aware of that, that is front and center for this conversation, for sure.
If it had full commercial zoning, it would probably have to conform to new building code rules too.
So we're talking about the zoning rewrite for that property now?
Anyone is welcome to apply for rezoning at any time.
I'm not taking that.
Here, let's go back here. Let's talk about short-term rentals and Fred Tibbs and Ike. This is a difficult conversation right now, and we know that Fred Tibbs and Ike are central to the conversation because of the way that the regulations have finally played out. We know that. We know that Fred Tibbs and Ike Landing are residential. Those are residential units.
That's the
Very
only reason I bought there.
residential
So I can have
tax,
the
and they've
option
been
to live.
Now, the idea is, I mean, I've heard that we do anything with them, they're gonna be empty. That's an idea. I don't know if I agree with that, but the other idea is if we don't do this, then you know, in the zoning rewrite, Fred Tibbs and Ike won't have their SDR permissions removed as well. That's totally a possibility. I mean, in a zoning review and rewrite, and we are gonna try to look at short-term rentals and the impact of short-term rentals on housing across Tofino, like, as we said earlier, the other resort communities have done, to in some cases a greater extent, then we are going to be looking, it will be a conversation of whose short-term rental permissions are removed. That is gonna be a conversation that we're gonna have to have as a community, much like this one. It's not gonna be an easier conversation. And we have, in a sense, we are, just like water and space and beaches, we are talking about finite resources. And what do we do with those finite resources? What is our priority? And right now, we're talking about housing. The idea is that is housing primarily for living in, or is housing going to be for investment? Okay, that is at the heart of what council has to wrestle with right now. And it is part of the conversation about Ike and Tibbs. It's part of that conversation.
There's
So
a nuance to that though, like in housing.
Kyle,
for
I think we may
Sorry.
have to,
Wait, well,
no, it's just, I don't mind a bit of back and forth, but we do have a couple people lined up for more questions. And I know baby isn't crying, but please, if someone is speaking and responding to your question, let them finish before you jump in. I know it's a difficult topic.
yeah, I've said it a couple, I'm repeating myself, so please forgive me if Molly was here, she'd be doing this to me. So go ahead.
I'm just
Go
gonna say,
ahead.
there's two different things in investment and speculation on housing. And one is that the entire national global problem of building a retirement account and the value of all housing is being treated in one way. This is income helpers for community members and small businesses. It is a different beast, and it's a terrible problem, and it's very complex. And I think would like to end on the note of the complexity of the problem leads me to believe the discussion is longer than we have this month or due to the provincial deadline.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm with the legal non-conforming permits. Does the council have the option to vote in favor of that still holding the permit?
Do you want me to clarify? Okay, so vote yes in a way, but
So-
it would require a zoning bylaw amendment for that use to continue. That's the discretion that council has.
So they do have the option then?
Yes, but likely that wouldn't occur until they go through the zoning.
So this
rewrite
says they
process.
don't. They said that our legal non-conforming will be shut down.
It will unless the zoning language changes.
So this isn't true, or? Like, what is it, like, this is like our livelihood, right? Like, if you're gonna be spreading this stuff, like, we should be informed.
How
Like,
about
we
I-
shouldn't have to do our own research.
Sorry, maybe if I can just follow up with
Sure.
what I've heard in the room today so far, is that the legal non-conforming will be removed until we do our zoning review, as far as I understand it.
And it becomes a zoning question. So if right now, if there's a short-term rental operator that is operating against the current zoning because of past use that's continued on for many, many years, right? Continuous, that will stop as per the province. If the only way for that business to continue or to start up again is for that zoning to be rewritten. We can't say, like, I'm just gonna be clear for you right now, council can't say, let's take a vote on your property or somebody's property is legal non-conforming and let them keep doing it. That has to be rezoned through a rezoning process, much like, you're familiar with the rezoning process. It takes a long time. And it doesn't guarantee anything. So that is what the province has blanket removed from everybody. There is no legal non-conforming status for a property that does not have the actual zoning for the business that they're operating anymore. That is in Tofino. We do not have control over that.
But you do have control over voting to bring it back in.
We could vote on a rezoning of the property. So for instance, let me just, I'm touched, okay, so just to make sure I get this clear for you, is that we can't just go at a meeting and say, let's say Joe Smith has a short-term rental that's currently legal non-conforming because they've had it for 20 years, previous to all the iterations of short-term rental bylaws and et cetera, just keep getting, Joe Smith just keeps getting his license because he's never let it lapse, right? All of a sudden, the province takes away the legal non-conforming protections of all the short-term rentals everywhere in the province. Joe Smith can't come to council and say, you guys just vote to let me keep running my business. That is not, you cannot do that. What would happen for Joe Smith to keep running his short-term rental is to have that property rezoned to allow for short-term rental permissions. That is a reason, that's a long process. It's got to go through all the same process that a normal rezoning of a property would go through, as you are very much aware. So the long and the short of it is, if somebody in Tofino has a legal non-conforming property and they can't come into compliance by simply, it's some structural issue or something that they can actually make a change to come into compliance, then they will lose their short-term rental license until the event that property is rezoned. Now, that may happen in the rezoning review, but there's no guarantee that, there just is no guarantee that some properties will get short-term rental permissions to the zoning, especially if council is intent on, further restricting some short-term rentals in order to save our housing stock. That's what I'm saying.
Man, that's gotta be hard to sit up there and listen to this.
It's hard to be here.
I bet.
Oh,
I bet, like, this is our future. Like Angie and all these guys, we're talking about our children.
oh, I know.
And it's,
I know. It's very, very difficult.
it's gotta be, and I hope you guys think long and hard and do the right thing.
Mhm.
We'll just stay on that just for a second, sorry. My name's Harold, most of you guys know me. I just wanted to follow up maybe with Nyla. I've just got what's printed off the, excuse me, the Talk Tofino website here, and I get the first part of what you said about the zoning rewrites, got it, okay. But there's a second part here that comes in. It says, Tofino can allow legal non-conforming short-term rentals to continue operating by amending the zoning bylaw to permit the use, got that, okay? But it also says, or by opting into the principal residence requirement. What does that mean? That's written right on the Talk Tofino site. What's meant by that?
So this is not my meeting. You and I have had this conversation.
Yeah,
These are questions for council.
Okay, sorry.
Mayor
Council.
Law just, I think, very thoroughly explained the legal non-conforming implications, and that's with respect to short-term rentals only. No other business. I just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah.
But Mr. Sadler, I don't want to have this discussion again here at the town hall. You and I can take it offline.
Yeah.
If there's a lack of clarity on the website, we can fix that up, but Mayor Law just responded to what would
Okay, so
happen in that regard.
That's all I'm asking for is just clarity. I don't want to have a debate on it. I just was reading one thing and you were saying something else. So I'm sorry to have,
I think I'm right.
Okay, so that other part there that's printed here, or by opting into the principal residence requirement, that shouldn't be there? Is that correct?
I have to read the website. Opting into the principal residence requirement is just that. It's
Yes.
opting into the.
That's what I thought I was understanding too, is that was all it was, right? But it says here, under the question, how can Tofino allow the legal non-conforming short-term rentals to continue operating? the answer to that is what I just read.
Yeah, I'll have to review what's written down there, yeah, I have to,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make
That's
a lot
why
of sense just. listening
before I
to it.
came, I thought I understood it, and then I printed this over and see.
I will fix that this
Yeah.
evening. I clarified it on the main part of the website. It did not go to the FAQs.
Okay,
So
I'm
I'm gonna
trying to
I'm
keep
gonna
us-
fix it tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
I
keep track
suspect
of
that
what
it's
it is.
it's just an error and it's stuck in there.
Okay. Well, good, thank you, because that helps me to understand more clearly what's going on. If I could, just gonna want to comment on one thing, which is this idea of, it's more of a comment, but just so that you guys understand, I know it's a tough thing, this is tough to choose, I know all of you, so. That a house, as a homeowner for 25 years, a house is an investment whether you want it to be or not. It's not simply a place you live in. Everybody knows there's money you pour into your house so that at some point, far in the future, your children can live in it. Maybe you sell it and retire on that, whatever it is, but you invest in it. Floors get worn out, the roof needs replacing, these all cost tens of thousands of dollars. And the cost of maintaining a home has gone through the roof. Mortgages have gone through the roof. I know that right now, building a home costs $400 a square foot. 300 to 400 at least. I know that that's how much it costs. When I built my house, it was 140. Okay? So given that those are facts, you can't change that. And no matter, it's not your fault, whatever decisions you make here don't affect that cost. So a 2,000 square foot home, which is not a big home, costs $800,000 to build. That is necessarily going to be reflected in its for sale price. So I don't see any houses around Tofino that are worth less than like $1.2 million. I mean, that's just reality. And my question is, even beyond opting in or opting out, but certainly with that in mind, if you have a piece of property that costs to rebuild it or to build it will cost $800,000 for that house, the property itself is going to be worth what, $500,000, $300,000? If we opt in, how much are we actually going to take off of that to make it affordable? And further on, when we go into our zoning amendments and that kind of thing, what we do there, how will that actually drop the price of a house? How much? We need to know, because there's a payment for everything. And if we try to make something affordable, there's going to be a payment for that somewhere. And like these gentlemen are saying, myself, this is my home. I don't have anywhere else to go. But the cost of living here is supplemented by my short-term rental. That's how I live here. We can look back at the past and say, we shouldn't have done that. But that is what we did. And now we have to live with the consequences of that. So really, how much are we looking at dropping the price of housing and making it available? We'll stick with the opt-in, opt-out thing. Will that, do you have any idea what that will do?
It's a good idea. It's good question.
Yeah.
The goal is to, you know, I feel like I talked a lot, so I do have an answer, but I'll look, I'll look to council first, for sure.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't see house prices dropping a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing across Ireland that with increased availability since this bill was announced, asking prices have dropped by about 10%.
Yeah.
Dropping 10% is not going to make things more affordable in Tofino.
Yeah.
I agree with that. What I want to see is an increase in rental stock. I'm tired of looking at Facebook and seeing young people pimping themselves trying to find a place to rent. And the time you've lived here a lot longer than I have, but since 2006 when I moved here, I've seen long-term rental stock just disappear. And the Tofino shuffle that used to happen, that doesn't exist anymore. People are just getting evicted. I don't know, well, I do know some people. Most of the people I know don't just buy a house outright. They end up renting so they can build up some money to purchase a house. And I think if we're gonna grow this community, we've got to increase the long-term rental stock so the young people can get foot in and gradually get a foot in the market. And they're gonna need help, whether that's from parents, government, or whatever. So it's not gonna make their houses affordable, but it may make them a bit more affordable. And there's lots of factors that play into affordability of a house, as you know. It's not just these regulations, it's the economy, it's interest rates and everything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I would like to see, rather than hit STR owners and force them to do long-term rental, because that will not help them make their mortgage. The long-term rental won't do it, especially under the current Rental Tenancy Act. It's just a losing game. Myself, as a solution, what I'd like to see is Windermere. Private development that comes in and builds places that are indeed long-term rentals and not permitted to be used for short-term rentals. But the rest of us, you know, already invested, we have already put our lives into this to have potentially the rug yanked out from under them. Like I say, there's the cost. Yes, you may open up some long-term rentals, but the people who owned that will be crippled financially. People who are, so why don't we work towards making landlords it affordable to be a landlord, to profitable to be a landlord, and then also to recognize that those of us who have lived here for a while and have built our lives on the existing conditions need to be respected and allowed to continue to be building our lives. I guess I've been here long enough, but thanks very much.
I just take 1 second, and Harold, I think it's an excellent question around the drop in value, and I've had conversations with our local real estate agents in terms of what their speculative thought, and even if it did come down a percentage, and we can speculate what it might be, it would still be unattainable for the median income of folks in this town. And so, just to add though, and I agree with you that we have to look at those types of housing that would be attainable to our community members, and we have been doing that through some of the regulations that we've been doing, some of the investments we've made in the Tofino Housing Corporation, as well as you may know, through Windermere and going through the rezoning process on a number of properties. Those are specific to rentals as well. There's also been a conversation, and there has been a conversation about home ownership as well and what potential could be in there. But I would agree with you 100% that our focus has been, as you know, that council has, between our own initiatives and those of the private sector in the last, I'm going to say, call it a year, but I know it's left a little more than that. We have been working towards those exact types of solutions.
And just a further comment on that, maybe to note that currently it's totally possible for people from out of town to buy a house and short-term rental it from afar, right? So that is an issue, and every time that happens, it does remove a home from Tofino, and that has happened progressively, and it will continue to happen progressively. And as I mentioned before, the rule is that the property will attain to its highest and best, i.e. most profitable use over time. That is what happens. And so, people who own their own home and have a vacation rental so that they can afford the mortgage, that is not, that's not, I don't see it personally as a problem. I don't know anybody up here who sees that as a problem. But that's not the problem that's before us. That's not the issue before us. The issue is that, we lose a home, and then we lose people, we lose a family. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, those people aren't here. They're gone. They don't have a voice at this table. So just to know, I'm cognizant of the people who aren't here because they've been forced out. They've lost their investment in Tofino. You want to, I'll tell you, I'll tell you why people, I mean, there's people who, I've lived here a couple decades now, and I've invested in this community. Many people have invested in this community in many different ways, whether it's, they put their time and their effort and their money into the community, and then they don't get a place to live, or they're forced out of their place to live as the properties turn over or become more affordable or turn into short-term rentals and become financialized. This happened. This exactly happened. It's happened for many, many, many years. Those people are gone. They lost their investment. Some of those people grew up here. They lived here. They put their time and energy. They're gone. They're not here to talk right now. So I just want to put that. I know you are. I know you are. I'm just saying that there is a group of people that aren't here, and we have to recognize that as well. And that's my.
Before we move on to the next question, there's a few people who are standing up at the mic who haven't had an opportunity to speak. Dwayne, I know you've been sitting there for a little bit, so I'm going to go to Dwayne first. I'm just going to ask that those of you who have asked a question, maybe let a few of the others standing on this side go first. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hi, Mayor and Council, Dwayne Bell, member of the fire department. I've been many years with the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Tofino and multiple other committees. And oddly enough, I was on the original Tofino Housing Corporation for 12 years before it sort of morphed into what it is. On top of that, I'm an owner at the Tips. So when this came about and I inherited some money from my mom's passing and I decided to invest it in this, I did my research. I saw that it had the zoning and it had always had that zoning. And so that's partly why I did decide to buy in that. So obviously you can imagine the shock to me when the province has come along and done this. And then on top of that, there's this opt-in thing. So I guess what I find affects me a bit and maybe even hurts and all that is that as a member of this community and as I've given my merits that I have given to this community and I expect to be having that respect back to me, do you feel that I'm giving the deserve and the consideration and the process that's going on right now? We are rushing through this faster than a person can get a building permit for a bathroom reno. And it's like, responsible and insincere to myself and all these people in this room to ram this through. And what is it, 2.5 months? Now I know the province set this up and the dates and all that, and I find it really odd that Josie was somebody that really wrote part of this. She was a Tofino member on this council. She knows how long it takes to go through this properly. So but that date was given by them. You don't necessarily have to meet that. There's multiple opportunities in the future to opt in. So I guess my question to you, beyond the benefits of sitting back and waiting and seeing what's going to happen, because trust me, provincial administration is not going to be at the forefront and fast in this. So my question to you is, do you think we are going through this at the proper speed and giving the proper consideration and process to all these people in this room that are going to be affected? And not to put the spotlight, but I was thinking maybe Catherine and Ally, because you guys haven't answered it. Can you let me know if you feel like we've gone through the proper consideration and process through this?
Yeah, thank you. About 1.5 years ago, we sat here at the all candidates meeting and short-term rentals were a topic. And one of the things that I thought was the solution at the time was primary residence or owner operated, and expressed concerns about enforcement. And then we find ourselves in late 2023 and the province says, here's an option, here's a chance to do primary residence and we're gonna help you enforce that. So I feel like we're obligated, or I feel obligated to explore it as an option. And I know that it's feeling rushed for people, but we are giving this an incredible amount of thought. We're pouring countless hours of research into it on our own. We're taking the time to read everybody's letters and comments and hear all the voices that are here speaking today. I don't know which way the decision is going to go on March 12th, but I know that I'm not going to feel that I rest the decision personally. I'm going to know that I've given it all the considerations, all the due considerations of this. I see some benefits to opting in early on, in that we can be part of shaping the future of the legislation. I think Councillor McMaster has spoken about that before. But that's kind of where I'm standing on this. I can't say what direction I think that it's going to go, but I can say that I feel we are all at this table giving it a significant amount of consideration and thought.
All right, sorry, I just took a fisherman's friend cough drop, so this might be a little hard to understand, but I would agree with a lot of what Councillor Thomas has just said. I think that we all are here at this table because we are always thinking about this community. I've been thinking about short-term rentals since my first friend got their first house and put in a short-term rental suite. You know, I've been thinking about every time I'm looking for a place to rent. I'm thinking about every time my friends have a baby and they get a short-term rental suite to help them out. I'm thinking about when my friends have to leave town because they want to have a baby. So, yeah, I don't feel too rushed.
All right, perfect. No, thank you very much. I know it's like.
I'll just add that I think it would have been really unfair if council would have went into the decision without the process that we're in right now. We've created as many opportunities as we can. We do have the deadline, and we decided to look into it and to take a decision. What is before us is still opt-in, not opt-in, wait and see. I understand that the province, for all communities facing the idea, the decision to opt in, that recurs every year. So yeah, those are the options before council right now. This is the right time of year to do it. Our community is really busy. So we're doing the best we can. I think what would have been really unfair is to come to any decision without a process. So yeah, this is what we have, and it's about what the time we have too. We're also always busy every year going through our budget process at council. Takes up a lot of the staff time and extra meetings at council and public consultation on that as well. So it may feel a little rushed, I think, more from your perspective. But we have a lot on our plate, and we've squeezed it in a time frame that will get us to some decision before the deadline the province put before us.
Can you squeeze in the Windermere application just quickly, please?
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
I will say, just for future development stuff, because obviously the easy answer is just to build more housing. And at least in my time on council, we've been very supportive of all the developments that are going to provide housing. There's a very real fear about the water situation, as well as, you know, the land that we have, and wanting to preserve some of our natural aspects that make this town beautiful, make it functional.
And Dwayne, maybe I'll just, if I could just add one last piece. for me, one of the conversations that has come up within the council table, this has been, I think the process itself has been important because this question has been brought forward by the province. And so the process that was inclusive, the public consultation process we're going through right now, the roundtables, talk to Fino. So there has been an engagement process where I think there, and this is a personal opinion, we also have other tools that are available to us, such as the zoning review that we're going through. And within that zoning review, we'll be able to accomplish quite a bit. And those will be incredibly hard decisions to be made as well. And that will be lots of public consultation will be needed in that process. This is one piece of that puzzle. And what's happened is the province has given a deadline. We don't really have to do anything, to be frank, because we're exempt from it, but there is the potential to opt in, and we would have to do that by a March 31st deadline for this particular year. You're absolutely right. It can happen March 31st of next year, or not happen at all. So part of the process is to have this conversation to address this very specific issue. But I think the bigger overriding issue through water, some of the major concerns that we have with the community can be held through that zoning review zoning bylaw review process. And within that, a lot of information that we'll get from the community is going to help answer a lot of the questions. This is just one small piece of that much larger puzzle, and where the zoning bylaw review will be, I think, much more comprehensive approach in dealing with these issues.
Hello, my name is Derek. I'm one of the individuals that Duncan spoke about who had to pimp themselves out to get involved and get into the community of Tofino. And I rented here and then I was able to use my life savings to buy a unit at Fred Tips. And so I just wanted to echo everything that Andy and Kyle has been saying, and how big of a decision this is, considering how much due diligence that we all did to be in this community for a very long time. It's terrifying. So thank you for taking the time. I know this is not an easy process. We really appreciate it. My questions are two, if that's okay. They're quite quick, I would like to think. The first one is, if we do opt in, will you be approving any new vacation rental licenses from here on out, or is that just like a complete no-go? And then the second would be, if a house is grandfathered in with a business license and that house sells, will that new owner be able to use that grandfathered business license and continue vacation renting? Thank you.
Maybe I'll answer this one. Two quick questions. Sorry, getting on here. I'm trying to remember. I got the last one first.
Yeah.
So there is no more legal non-conforming protections for short-term rentals in the province. So that's grandfathering. So just to be clear, that's the previous colloquial term, grandfathering, which is inappropriate now. So legal non-conforming, there's no more protections. The only way for a currently non-conforming, soon to be non-conforming business is for rezoning, which takes some time. And may or may not succeed as zoning goes. So that's the second question first. And your first question is, again,
it was, if we do opt in, will you be approving any more vacation rental licenses, or is that just not?
So this is the first question council is tackling regarding short-term rentals. In the zoning review, then short-term rentals will be the first of that. So short-term rentals will dominate the first questions about zoning, right? Now that may include, there may include a cap on short-term rentals. I mean, that's a possibility. Other towns have done it. Other towns cap each neighborhood. They zone each neighborhood, whether they're allowed short-term rentals or not, such as, I'll give you an example of Sun Peaks. Sun Peaks allows some neighborhoods that abut a ski hill to have short-term rentals up to 20 or 25%. I think they've upped it to 25, and then they stop it. So only 25% of those units that conform in other ways to their bylaw licensing requirements are allowed to have short-term rentals. So there's lots of, I mean, this is the first question council is addressing of many. Zoning restrictions, we can do all sorts of things. And, there is the possibility of a cap on short-term rentals, which, I mean, there's merits to it all. There's pros and cons to everything, right? as everyone will know, over the next year and a half, there's pros and cons to everything. Council has to weigh those pros and cons heavily. It is not an easy conversation. And we basically have to go back to our base community values, our policy decisions, and try to build a case for what's reasonable and rational for the community as a whole. So those are possibilities.
Thank you so much. I hope you take the time to do that.
How you doing? I'm Brian Grigg, and I'm just gonna apologize. I was coaching basketball at the school, so I might have missed a couple things. I just had a couple things that I wanted to be clarified. One was with the opting in, the housing, like, I just took this off the actual Tofino Housing Corporation website. So directly from the website, it says the Tofino Housing Corporation has made the decision not to proceed with the construction and sale of price-restricted residential restricted duplexes on Peterson Drive due to the lack of households interested and able to purchase the homes. So the Housing Corporation is taking time to consider how to review, revive, or configure the development of the duplex lots on Peterson Drive. So with regards to opting in and affecting the TIPS and Ike Landing, one thing we talked about is supply, right? So we definitely get a 40 unit supply, but what would be affected by the demand, like the out of town demand? And so when we're looking at things that if you opt in, when we're looking at the Tofino Housing Corporation, there was covenants on who could purchase those. There's also covenants on like prices on resale. And so those are kind of like effects on demand, right? They're not as attractive to people outside of the town to go in and buy them. They're also not as attractive to people inside of the town to buy them too, because they don't have the same kind of investment earning opportunities. But one of the things that I wanted to know was, how do you feel like this opting in is going to deal with what we know is the outside demand, right?
Sure. Yeah. So outside demand is a big component of council's deliberation. And it again goes back to our properties in Tofino open for primarily investment assets, right? So that's what we're talking about, part of it. And also internally, I mean, is a house going to be removed from as a primary dwelling and turned into a financial asset, a financial investment? That is at the core of this. So price restricted, resident restricted obviously removes almost all of that incentive, that investment incentive. And so they're restricted to residents, they're restricted to residents who can afford them and a specific size, and they're restricted to resale values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bunch of reasons those duplexes didn't go. I have my own opinions, but it'd be hard to extrapolate exactly why those didn't sell. The question is, I think your question is, what about Fred Tibbs and Ike? Is that you want to?
Well, it's kind of like, it's going to kind of lead in a little bit or two, because the understanding is, I've heard a lot of people talk really well and eloquently about this. I'm not directly affected by this myself, but as a community member, and the idea of, like, I've heard people making factual decisions, researching investments, with the rules that are set aside and making the best decisions at that time. And now what's happening is there is a blanket legislation that's come across, and we're talking about 40 units in Tofino. And so what I'm really looking at is, as my thinking evolves on this is, one is, I've heard people talk about this, why are we doing this year? I know that there's other resort municipalities that are taking a wait and see. I'm not really interested in shaping legislation for the province. What I'm really interested in doing is getting it right with the best information I have. And what I'm hearing is happening is, there's a lot of opinions on the opt-out side. There's a lot of opinions on the opt-in side. And we're basically speculating where those 40 units are going to go. So are people going to sit on them? Are they going to get sold? Are you able to wait long so that somebody from, Lower Mainland, somewhere else where it has the capita to purchase it and just use it as a vacation home can buy it, are able to wait long enough so that you don't have to sell yours at the cheapest rate. So I'm not too sure why opting in is like why we want to do it this year, in the sense that we do have the opportunity to wait, collect metrics on it, see what happens in other municipalities, and then make an informed decision either to opt in or opt out. Because as I'm hearing right now, it's really speculation on both sides, and we're not using evidence. And so I just want to know, really, and I heard you talked about like you put time and thought into this, that's, you know, and that is what I'm expecting. And I understand you're in a tough position. You're the lightning rod of negativity, right? That's what's going to happen. No matter what you do, people aren't going to be happy. And that's that soft skill you need to employ. But why are we really talking about this year? And then we have this deadline, but this is a deadline that has been made out by the municipality as well as the province. And the second part of that is, I've heard, and I was about 15, 20 minutes late, but my understanding from the other kind of town halls that you've had this week or last week, that the majority of the feedback was not to opt in. So why are we considering, or what I'm hearing is, I'm kind of getting the sense that we're considering opting in, when a lot of the constituents, you know, the people who are voting you into office are saying, don't opt in. So that's the two. Why are we taking such a short amount of time?
One of the questions we seem to be getting a lot is why we are looking at this and other resort municipalities maybe aren't. The reason the other resort municipalities are not potentially looking at this, or the majority of them are not, is, and I have all of their short-term rental restrictions in front of me here for the other 13 resort municipalities. Soyuz doesn't allow short-term rentals at all. Every single one of them that does allow restricts them to very specific zones. The majority of them, there's two, Harrison Hot Springs, Ucluelet, you have to do it within your house that you reside in, so traditional bed and breakfasts only, so it doesn't apply to them. We have one where you have to be owner operated. So what we're looking at is all of these other resort municipalities are already more restrictive than the principal residence.
Are they better off? Well, yeah.
That's subjective, and I would caution sometimes against comparing ourselves directly to some of these other communities, because we are unique.
I can give you some examples of.
Sorry, let's just remember, if you want to speak, please come to the mic. Let's not all start shouting, even though it's really fun.
Here's a good example. I mean, there's a lot of people saying that this is going to happen and this is not going to happen, and nobody knows what they're doing, and it's all speculative. It's not exactly true. Okay, so just to give you an example, the federal government does numerous research on this and released a report. And you know, I've read a lot of reports, but first of all, to know if you have a problem. If Tofino has an actual issue with short-term rentals, it's good to know. And there is a national equation, basically, where you can find out if your community has a problem. And they basically take the percentage of short-term rentals per unit, and you do a quick calculation with offset by your vacancy rate. In the government report, you know, I can give you guys government reports. The highest percentage of short-term rentals per unit in the national report was 20%, and that was for high-density downtown Toronto vacation rental specific units, where those were designed for that. Ours is 25%. It also talks about, and then we look at our vacancy rate. Now, if we were to include the people living in illegal substandard housing, illegal suites, trailers, tents, etc., I would suggest that we probably have a negative vacancy rate. And so when you put those two together, anybody in the short-term rental research, the housing research, would say we have a problem. We have a big problem. Now, we're a resort community, so we rely on short-term rentals for a portion of our economy, and I don't doubt that, and I'm not anti-short-term rental. But we have a problem. There's no doubt about it. And it's getting worse, and it's going to get worse. We know that. So, and we know from research, both internationally, nationally, that what works and what doesn't. And the latest report that came out by Desjardins, the bank, I've circulated to some people. It's a very easy report. I encourage everybody to read it. It's only about 5 pages, 4 or 5 pages, but they note and they cite studies across Canada for hundreds of communities where they looked at communities that have brought in short-term rental controls. And they did enforcement, and like you know, Tanya said, can't always rely on Airbnb to give the governments the right data. We can't always rely on the governments to enforce as well as they hope to enforce. What does work is bringing in a principal residence requirement, and that report said it dropped short-term rentals across Canada in 330 communities across Canada by 50%. So these is real data. Now you can always you know, argue that data. You can say it doesn't work here, it's going to be different here, this place is going to be empty. I take that data back and I think, how do I personally, how is it going to look in Tofino? And if somebody says to me, well, you know, this building, all of my clients are just going to leave their house empty. You know, people are going to swoop in from Whistler and Vancouver and buy up all the houses, and they're going to remain empty. I think, okay, is that true? And I go back, I look at sales history. I go back and look at what houses have sold for how much. Are they empty now? I look at multi-family unit complexes in Tofino, and there is a few of them. And I look and say, they've all been out for sale. You know, they've sold for quite a bit, like you would, sold for quite a bit. Sea Otter, all these places, First Street, you know, Gibson's, et cetera, Are they empty? Are they all sitting empty by these out-of-towners who swoop in and buy them for cheap? Doesn't look like it. So I just want to say that, and this, I'm not saying whether or not you know, we're going to decide one thing or another, but it's one thing to say it, this is going to happen. It's another thing to go back and do the research and stay up all night, you know, scour through all this stuff and think, is this actually going to happen, and what is going to happen? And my estimation is that if you bring in principal residence requirement, if you further restrict short-term rentals, the house prices come down, long-term rentals go up, the availability of long-term rentals go up, and there is a chance that we'll move forward in addressing the housing crisis and the health of our community and the impacts of ongoing loss of homes. That's what I believe. Now, I'm not saying this particular thing is going to do it, but it may work somewhat. I'm just saying.
Okay, so I just realized I was online here for a bit. There's other people I want to do, but I'd be remiss to say, so you used the word estimate, you used the word chance, and guess. So those are all speculative terms, right? We don't know. And, you know, Councillor McMaster, right? Maybe talked about when Scott was up here, he was talking about like the cost of housing dropping. You know, we don't know, but the feeling seemed to be that it wasn't going to drop that significant, right? And so, you know, I guess like what I'm looking at is that I think there is it seems that there is a housing shortage, right? You put forth things through the Tofino Housing Corporation. We have the headwaters. We talked about building more rental, right? That's something that not only that, the one down in Sharp Road, there's things that the district of Tofino has been doing. One of the aspects is that I was really taken back by was the fact that terminology on the website, the lack of interest and ability to afford, right, these duplexes. And so when I'm seeing that, and that addresses that outside demand, which we don't really know what it's going to be, but I know if I was sitting outside and I was like, we have Tofino, this is Tofino. I came from Southern Ontario, me and my wife came, we've raised our 4 kids here. This is where we chose to be. And we had to do different things to get what we're doing right now. But that demand, you know, and the housing shortage is a very complex thing. Tiff Macklem was just in the paper talking about interest rates. He says, well, no, interest rates only affect one aspect of it, supply. And he talked about zoning regulations, and he talked about all sorts of different factors that occur to this. And so what I see is that we get supply of 40 40 units on the market that may get sold, may not get sold, may get rented, may not get rented, we don't know. May get bought by people in town, maybe get bought by people out of town. But what I do see is that we're doing other things moving forward, like the Tofino Housing Corporation. And I'm really interested to see, I guess what I'm really like, that's a statement I'm gonna leave, but I'm really interested to see if we choose to opt in for this to provide more housing for constituents in Tofino. Why would we do that when the Tofino Housing Corporation has said that building these duplexes, that like, I'm not too sure on the numbers. Again, it's just 2 lines. But why would we do this when you're hearing about the people in the community that are going to be affected? We've made investment moves, and yes, houses are investments, commodities, like it or not. That's the dream, right? You buy a house, pay a mortgage, you do all this stuff, and then you sell later on. But why would we opt in when there hasn't seemed to be a threshold of demand being met for what we were doing for the Tofino Housing Corporation? And I'm just gonna leave it at that, but I do, thank you very much.
I will be really quick because I have spoken already. Chris has generously given me this moment. So just comment, no question. Well, I'll have a question, but I'll leave it with you. So the way that regulations work, as you probably well know, federal government regulates at a very general level for all of us, provincial more specific, and then bylaw is very specific to an area. So the province in its wisdom has given us, these special resort communities, an ability to determine our own unique situation. And we're always talking about how unique we are as a community. So does the province offer this community something that we cannot do ourselves in this regulation? Or is it just additive? Is it just, we're just trying to hopefully get more enforcement for this issue? So I don't see what the province is offering as something more than what we ourselves can do. So that, I'll leave that question with you. And the other thing is, Tofino will always, always, always be expensive and unaffordable because it's surrounded by ocean on 3 sides and a national park on the far end. So there will always be a limitation and high demand. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to provide accommodation for people and homes for people, but I'm just saying that it's always going to be a challenge, and the population of the planet is growing. That's all.
Hello, everyone. First, I just want to acknowledge like how challenging these decisions are to make, and there's a lot of factors involved in whether we opt in or not, or we whether we opt in or not, or we just kind of change the zoning bylaws that exist. Like there's a lot of layers and complexities and subtleties to it. I just think I personally wanted to say that I think that in a lot of ways, short-term rentals keep people here in place too. So yes, they push people out. It makes it so that people can profit more from their properties. And like especially R1 zoning can be easily exploited so that the primary function of the house is a rental rather than housing. But I think we also need to acknowledge how much those short-term rentals subsidize a lot of people's rent as well. So if we were to opt in, or like for all the conversations, I don't think I'd personally be affected in any way if we were to opt in or not. So I'm simply speaking on behalf of like the true reality of numbers and how much it costs to have a house. And all my friends that I know that are living on properties that have short-term rentals on them that have affordable rent. And those people have affordable rent because they're essentially subsidized by the short-term rentals. And I think that's something really important to acknowledge. Like, and also when you say something like only 3.5% of people in Tofino can afford to own here, well, how many people could afford to own even if the land was given to them for free? Like the way I see it is in lots of ways, the short term makes it so that you can stay here. And it does push people up, absolutely. But at the same time, I think we need to be really careful that if we make it so that short-term rentals are more restricted, that, yeah, it doesn't push people out who are essentially subsidized by those short-term rentals. Just another comment, yeah, like Tibbs and Ike Landing, like whether that zoning get changed, that won't affect me personally. But honestly, I really think that that's mostly going to affect people like Andy, Kyle, and Dwayne that have invested more than people who are out of town. And I really think, and this is just my opinion, that those places are going to go to people who don't live here anyways, and they're just going to sit empty anyways. So when it comes to zoning for those properties, I think that really needs to be considered. So another thing that needs to be considered that's a really harsh reality is the really severe restrictions for long-term renters as well. So when inflation's at 7% or whatever it was at, and landlords are then unable to change rent to just cover basic costs. I know there's a lot of long-term landlords that are not genuinely good people and they're just trying to profit off of people, and that's not what we want. But at the same time, if you have someone who's paying taxes, paying a mortgage, paying all these things, and they're not even able to adjust their rental rates to meet inflation, then it's really risky for people to get involved with long-term rentals. So I'm not saying yes, we need long-term rental stock, absolutely, but we also need to make it appealing to have long-term rentals. And that's a bigger conversation for you guys. And again, I respect the position you're in because it's really challenging, but I think that that needs to be acknowledged as well.
So maybe a comment from council. Anybody want to make a comment? No. Just to be clear, I just want to make clear, I have not heard from this council, anybody on this council, that there is any, that the issue is owners who have a home who want a vacation rental their suite. I really haven't. So, there's a support for short-term rentals on this council, and it has been every council. It's just how do you rein in the negative consequences that are starting to override the benefits? And we have to somehow. Go ahead.
My name is Jean-Paul Froment. Similar to Andy, I've spent my whole life here. I grew up in Tofino, a community that was a fishing and logging community, and now it's turned into a tourism community mostly, which I feel very fortunate that we've had that opportunity to be able to do that. A lot of other places in the world haven't been able to sort of change and adapt. And I've seen a lot of people have to leave the community for various reasons, and that might be jobs, that might be property taxes, that might be places turning into vacation rental schools, whatever. There's so many different reasons. But I hear the words highest best case use, investments, and stuff like that. And I just wanted to share that the property values aren't going backwards. And you can shut down vacation rentals and it might cause a small dip and it's going to come back up. And if you look at history, property values are just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up. And especially the way inflation's been going lately, that doesn't seem to be improving for any number of reasons. And it's just going to get more expensive. And so by shutting down the vacation rentals, is not going to solve that issue. And what ends is going to be the unintended consequences is a lot of the locals that are depending on that income are now going to lose it. And then one of the things that we have seen in the past is that it seems like a good idea to shut them down. But if you look at the reason why we're all here, the reason why tourism works is because it's such a beautiful, unique spot on the planet. And like Tanya said, it's such a finite amount of land surrounded by waterfront. And sure, there are some properties where vacation rentals might be bringing up the value a little bit more than if it was a non-vacation rental property. But if you take oceanfront properties and you stop rentals, you're going to create more exclusiveness and more elite properties. And if you look at Chesterman, South Chesterman, we've seen it happen. It's going to keep happening. The more you do, the more you shut down properties that are waterfront properties, you're going to drive the value up. And that's going to be an unintended consequence of some of these decisions. And I just wanted you guys to just think about that.
Can I make a quick comment on values
Sure.
of homes? Is that all right? And then, listen, we're talking about homes here. We're talking about investments. These are investment assets. And I just, from my thinking, just from an investment asset, if you remove an investment asset's ability to bring in revenue, that value will go down. That's the way it works. So the idea, I just want to say, the idea that house prices have gone up and up and up, and now they're 1.6 million for the median household in Tofino, part of that is because they are investment assets. They're financialized. That's what the governments across the world are saying. And so the idea that there's this infinite growth value in homes, it is directly linked to the financialization of those homes. And if you remove the ability of those homes or restrict them to make revenue, they will go down. Now, they might not come down completely, but they certainly will go down. And so I just want to say that they know that is true. Now, it's happening in Victoria right now, it's happening in Kelowna, like places that have, in the last couple of months, it's happened. And in Tofino, the housing prices have already come down from previous BC assessment. My house price dropped a couple $100,000 already. So I'm just saying that house prices in Tofino have already dropped. House sales, we're going to ask about house sales, will probably drop too. I'm not going to speak on something I don't know for sure, but I've certainly seen houses removed from the market because they don't sell, based on the fear that maybe they're not going to be able to short-term rental. And I suggest that house prices will continue to be harder to sell in a market that is, in a sense, in Tofino, not secure. No house in BC now is going to be the same, give the same security to a potential investor than it did 6 months ago. It just isn't. And so those house prices are going to drop. It's just the way it is. And I know that, and I think it would be hard to argue against it.
House prices are gonna change as the market swings, and if you look at history, like it goes up, it goes down a little, and it goes up.
Sorry, do you just want to go to Mike so we can have that on record, please?
Just saying that, yeah, house prices are gonna go up and down, the market goes up and down, just like, when we crashed in 2008, things went totally sideways for a lot of people's properties, not so much in Tofino. And if you look at history, property values go up, they go down a little, and they go up a lot. They go down a little, and they go up a lot. It's super consistent. It's really easy to see. And I'm gonna argue with you that the most valuable properties, the owners don't need to rent them. It's like, I'm sorry.
We only
Let's,
have a couple minutes left, so we probably only have time left for one question, so I'll go to Peter here. Sorry, someone who hasn't spoken.
Thank you very much. I've seen the way some people are playing their cards, and the people that want to opt in and help increase the amount of long-term rentals. Your heart's in the right place. I don't agree it's going to happen the way you would like, but fair enough. So I'm coming here. My name is Peter Stubbins. I'm a director for the Canadians for Sustainable Societies. There's a bigger picture here that we haven't talked about. What is driving housing prices? Stephen Polis, who is the ex-governor of Bank of Canada, and Mike Moffat, who's a housing economist, was hired by the Ontario Housing Builders of Ontario, have said the number one reason why housing prices are so high is because of population growth in Canada. Population growth is a function of immigration. We've had 5 million more people in the last 10 years. The last 2 years, we've had 1 million temporary and permanent immigrants coming into this country. That's a million bedrooms a year. Think about it. That's what's been driving up the price. When the Trudeau government came in 2015, the number of immigrants coming into the country increased dramatically from the Harper years, from the Mulroney years, and from the Chrétien years. So the numbers started ramping up, temporary and permanent numbers. So that's what's driving the housing prices going up. It's the number one reason. There's other reasons. It's the interest rates are low, and there's a lot of foreign ownership, STRs. Those are minor factors from my perspective. Now, if you think about this, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation says we have to build 5.6 million more homes by 2032. No province has a plan. The federal government doesn't have a plan to meet those demands. So housing prices are going to keep on going up. Yes, there will be a dip. And as the good counselor said, it may dip 10%, maybe it's dipped 15%. But as that gentleman over there said, they go up, they go down a little bit, they keep on going up. So that's just an observation on that's a macroeconomic perspective. And it affects Tofino, because Tofino does not operate with exclusive what goes on in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, because the people in those cities want to get out of those places because they're becoming less desirable to live in. I was born in Toronto, and by the time I was 19, I was the hell out of there. Anyways, so I really like the whole model of on Arnett Street. You have 36 apartments on that street. And I've talked to some of the residents. They like living in there. The rent is controlled because of the Tenancy Act. And they like living there. They got stable housing. I think you need more of that. And I've heard that said by some of the council members. And I know it's difficult to do that, but it's a model. It's an old model. It's been tempered by time. There's apartment buildings are desirable places to live for many people. 30% of Canadians rent. It's just that it's not pleasant necessarily, as Chris said, to be a long-term rental owner because of the restrictions on the amount that you can increase the prices and other reasons. But I see that as a model going forward. Now, I understand places like Cortez Island, correct me if I'm wrong. Kat, I mean, you have the data in front of you from the other, some of the other tourist communities. I think that Cortez wants to increase the business licenses on short-term rentals, but not restrict them, and use that as a propellant for housing, rental housing. I don't know if that's a viable model. I'm just throwing that out there. And lastly is, could you expand on the whole notion of when you're talking about changing the zoning you're reviewing the zoning in this municipality. Can you get a little bit more clear about what that means is with respect to short-term rentals, long-term rentals? Thank you.
We have a very brief period of time to answer that question, so maybe 30 seconds. And Pilates starts at 6:30, and I don't want it to get anyone else.
Perfect. So let me think. What was the question again? Expand on the zoning. Why don't we do that last one first, or maybe that's the only one. Zoning. Yeah, the zoning rewrite, review and rewrite is to look at how our zoning across the board. And that may, like Councillor Thomas noted, with respect to short-term rentals specifically, it may be, how council's looking at finding a number that is decent for Tofino, that we can come up. It might be that, there's different options. We say, okay, what's a healthy number of short-term rentals for a community where a community can still survive, people can still own their homes, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's 20%. How do we do that? How do we achieve that number? Or is it 100%? Everybody can short-term rental and they'll simply be bought up by investors. And then everybody here will be renting eventually, as people move away. That's a possibility. So all those things have to happen. This is a changing landscape. It's not the same as it was 7 years ago. It is a different place. It's a different landscape at Tofino. And part of this is the technology has changed. We've got Airbnb, which is a $92 billion management company that anybody can access. and turn their house into a revenue maker, or their investment property, or their 3 investment properties into revenue maker. It's a new technology and it demands new regulation. That's what's happened. It's the whole thing together. And we also have to take, I'm gonna go back to just one last thing, because we have to talk about finite resources. We're going to talk about water soon. And that may factor into people's understanding about water. What does that mean about development? What does that mean about the housing that we have? That's gonna come into public discussion as well. So I look forward to that as well. So it's going to be a very tense year. Lots of stuff that we have to deal with, and it's just the timing, and we're here, you're there, we're all essentially in this together, trying to navigate our way through a very difficult changing time, and it's just the way it is. So thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we do have to close out now, and if you, I don't mean to kick everyone out, but I do have to because we need to set up for Pilates. We will address, I'll talk to council about that, but we do have to tidy up in here, so I just encourage you to have your discussion outside. Thank you.